I didn't expect what happened in the captain's private lounge that night. But I stayed. Even now, months later, when I think back to that voyage across the Atlantic, I still find it hard to explain how a single decision changed everything. Most people board a cruise ship expecting beautiful sunsets, endless ocean views, and a temporary escape from reality. That's exactly what I thought I was getting when I stepped aboard the Ocean Majesty. What I didn't know was that somewhere between the sparkling decks, elegant restaurants, and moonlit waters, I was about to stumble into a story that would completely change the course of my life. And strangely enough, it all started because of a door I wasn't supposed to open. My name is Ava Bennett, and when I boarded that cruise, I was running from a life I no longer recognized. 6 months earlier, my engagement had fallen apart in the most humiliating way imaginable. The man I had planned to marry wasn't just unfaithful, he had been living an entirely different life behind my back. By the time I discovered the truth, invitations had already been mailed, deposits had already been paid, and my future had already been built around promises that meant absolutely nothing. The breakup didn't just leave me heartbroken, it left me embarrassed, angry, and worst of all, doubtful of my own judgment. I spent months replaying every memory, every conversation, every warning sign I had ignored. Eventually I became exhausted from carrying the weight of it all. That's when I booked the cruise. Not because I wanted adventure, not because I wanted romance. I simply wanted distance from everything that reminded me of the life I had lost. The first few days aboard the Ocean Majesty were exactly what I needed. The ship itself felt like a floating city of luxury. Every morning I watched the sunrise from the upper decks, while the ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. During the afternoons I explored quiet lounges, read books beside the pool, and wandered through parts of the ship I'd never seen before. For the first time in months, my thoughts felt quieter. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't controlling every second of my day anymore. I was finally beginning to breathe again. That changed the moment I met him. The first time I saw the captain was during the welcome gala on the second evening. Hundreds of passengers gathered inside the grand ballroom, as music played, and waiters moved through the crowd carrying champagne. Then the captain stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone aboard. The room immediately fell silent. It wasn't just because of his uniform. It was the way he carried himself. Calm, confident, completely in control. He spoke with the kind of quiet authority that made people listen without realizing they were doing it. His name was Captain Nathan Carter. At the time, he was simply another face I'd probably never see again. Or at least that's what I thought. Over the following days, our paths kept crossing in ways that felt increasingly difficult to explain. One morning he happened to be standing near the observation deck, where I liked drinking coffee. Another afternoon we ended up side by side during a cooking demonstration. Later that evening he appeared near the promenade deck while I was watching the sunset. Every encounter was brief, polite, and completely innocent, yet somehow each conversation lasted a little longer than the one before it. Each interaction revealed another small detail about the man behind the uniform. And every time I walked away, I found myself thinking about him longer than I wanted to admit. The strange thing wasn't that I found him attractive. The strange thing was how easy it felt talking to him. Since my breakup, I'd become skilled at keeping people at a distance. Most conversations felt exhausting. Most connections felt forced. But with Captain Carter, there was none of that. There was no pressure, no performance, no expectations. Somehow he made me feel comfortable enough to be myself. And that scared me, more than I cared to admit. One evening, after dinner, I decided to take a walk through one of the quieter sections of the ship. Most passengers were attending a theater performance, leaving the hallways unusually empty. As I wandered through an unfamiliar corridor, I noticed a partially open door near the end of the hallway. Soft light spilled into the passageway. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't trying to snoop. I simply wondered what was inside. As I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't a passenger area at all. Beyond the doorway was a luxurious private lounge unlike anything I'd seen aboard the ship. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean. Leather furniture surrounded a polished fireplace. shelves lined with books stretched along one wall. It felt less like part of a cruise ship, and more like a hidden retreat floating above the sea. I was so distracted by the room that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Most passengers don't usually find this place. The voice nearly made me jump out of my skin. I spun around and found myself face to face with Captain Carter. For a moment, neither of us spoke, then he smiled. Not an annoyed smile, not an angry smile. "I can explain," I said quickly. "Can you?" His grin widened. I laughed nervously. "Probably not." To my surprise, he didn't ask me to leave. Instead, he stepped inside and held the door open. "Since you've already found it," he said, "you might as well see the view." I should have said no. I should have thanked him and returned to my cabin. Instead, I stepped inside, and that single decision would change everything. For nearly an hour we talked while moonlight danced across the ocean outside the windows. We spoke about travel, life, regrets, and second chances. Somewhere during that conversation, I forgot he was the captain and I was a passenger. It simply felt like two people sharing a moment neither of them expected. Yet as comfortable as the evening felt, something else caught my attention. Several times during our conversation, the captain glanced toward the door as though he was expecting someone. Each time, his expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not worry. Something closer to concern. I noticed it. And apparently, so did someone else. As I turned toward one of the windows, I caught sight of a woman standing outside in the hallway. She wasn't walking past. She wasn't lost. She was watching us. The moment our eyes met, she disappeared. Just like that. Gone. A chill ran through me, because somehow, deep down, I knew that woman wasn't watching by accident, and I had a feeling this wasn't the first time she'd been there. The rest of that night should have been easy to forget. A brief conversation with the captain, a beautiful hidden lounge, and an awkward moment involving a curious passenger in the hallway. Yet as I returned to my cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about the woman I had seen watching us. The image replayed in my mind over and over. She hadn't looked surprised to find someone inside the lounge. She had looked focused, intentional, almost as if she had been looking specifically for the captain. What bothered me most wasn't her presence. It was the expression on her face. There had been something unsettling in her eyes. Not anger exactly, not jealousy, something closer to concern. The kind of look someone gives when they know a secret they aren't sure should stay hidden. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself replaying the evening. The conversation. The captain's smile. The way he seemed genuinely interested in everything I said. More importantly, I couldn't stop thinking about the moments when his attention drifted toward the door. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it. Now it felt significant. Almost as if he had been expecting an interruption. The following morning, I woke earlier than usual and headed toward the upper observation deck. The ocean stretched endlessly around the ship beneath a pale blue sky. Most passengers were still asleep, leaving the area surprisingly quiet. Normally I enjoyed these peaceful moments alone, but that morning my thoughts felt far too crowded. I needed distraction. Instead, I found the captain. He stood near the railing, speaking with one of the ship's senior officers. The conversation appeared serious. Both men wore expressions that immediately caught my attention. The officer handed the captain a folder before walking away. Captain Carter remained standing there for several seconds, staring down at whatever was inside. His face revealed nothing, but something about his posture felt different. Tense, focused, burdened. For reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly felt guilty for watching. As if sensing my presence, the captain looked up. Our eyes met instantly. The serious expression disappeared. Its place appeared the familiar smile. I had started looking forward to far more than I should have. Ava, I smiled despite myself. Captain. He laughed softly. You know, at some point you're allowed to call me Nathan. That seems dangerous. Why? Because it makes it harder to remember you're in charge of an entire ship. His smile widened. Maybe I don't want you remembering that. My heart reacted before my brain could stop it. I immediately looked away toward the ocean. The captain seemed amused by my discomfort. Unfortunately, so was I. For the next 20 minutes, we talked about everything and nothing. The conversation felt as effortless as it had the night before. Yet, even while laughing and enjoying myself, I noticed something strange. Every few minutes, the captain scanned the surrounding deck. Not obviously. Not enough for most people to notice. But I noticed, and the more I noticed, the more curious I became. Eventually, he excused himself for a meeting, leaving me alone with far more questions than answers. That afternoon, the Ocean Majesty hosted one of its exclusive captain's receptions. Passengers gathered throughout the grand atrium, while live music echoed through the ship. Elegant dresses, formal suits, and sparkling glasses filled the room. I had almost decided not to attend, but curiosity won. The captain stood near the center of the reception greeting guests. Dozens of people surrounded him, yet somehow his eyes still found mine. For a brief moment, the noise of the room seemed to disappear. Then, something unexpected happened. The woman appeared. The same woman from outside the lounge. The same woman who had vanished the moment I noticed her. This time she wasn't hiding. She walked directly toward the captain. I immediately noticed the change in his expression. His smile vanished. The atmosphere around him shifted. The woman said something quietly. I couldn't hear the words, but whatever she said clearly mattered. For several seconds they spoke in hushed voices. Then she handed him a folded piece of paper. The captain looked at it. His jaw tightened. The woman walked away without another word. The entire exchange lasted less than a minute, yet it felt significant enough to change the mood of the entire evening. I spent the next hour pretending not to think about it. Pretending not to watch the captain from across the room. Pretending not to wonder who she was. The problem was that every answer seemed to create even more questions. That evening, after dinner, a handwritten envelope appeared outside my cabin door. My name was written neatly across the front. Inside was a single note. Meet me at the private lounge, 10 p.m. I'll explain everything. Nathan. I stared at the message for nearly 5 minutes. Every logical part of my brain told me this was a terrible idea. The captain clearly had secrets. The mysterious woman clearly knew something, and yet I wanted answers. More than that, I wanted to see him. At exactly 10 o'clock, I found myself standing outside the private lounge once again. The ocean beyond the windows was black beneath the moonlit sky. The hallway was empty, silent. Almost too silent. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened immediately. The captain stood there waiting, but before I could say a word, I noticed something. His expression wasn't relaxed. It wasn't confident. It wasn't even calm. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely worried. Without saying a word, he stepped aside and motioned for me to enter. Then, after I walked inside, he quietly closed the door behind us and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the room. Suddenly, every question I had felt far more important than before. The sound of the lock clicking into place instantly changed the atmosphere inside the lounge. It wasn't fear that I felt. It was uncertainty. The captain wasn't the kind of man who seemed reckless or impulsive. Every move he made appeared deliberate. Every word carried purpose. That's why seeing genuine concern on his face unsettled me more than the locked door itself. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The moonlight reflected across the windows behind him, while the Ocean Majesty continued its steady journey through the darkness. Finally, the captain exhaled and motioned toward one of the sofas. Please sit. I did. Not because I felt comfortable, because I needed answers. The captain remained standing for a moment before taking a seat across from me. He rubbed a hand across his jaw and stared toward the floor as though searching for the right words. You've probably realized something strange has been happening. I couldn't help laughing softly. That's one way to put it. His expression remained serious. Ava, there are things I should have told you sooner. My stomach tightened immediately. Those words rarely led anywhere good. The captain looked directly at me. The woman you've been seeing, I immediately interrupted. Who is she? For the first time, hesitation appeared in his eyes. And that hesitation scared me, because whatever answer was coming clearly wasn't simple. Before he could respond, a sudden knock echoed against the lounge door. 3 sharp knocks, the captain froze. My heart skipped. For several seconds, neither of us, the knocking came. Again. More urgent this time. The captain stood and crossed the room. When he opened the door, one of the ship's security officers stepped inside. The officer looked nervous, very nervous. "Captain, we found another one." The words immediately caught my attention. Another one? The captain's expression darkened. "Where?" "Deck 12. The officer glanced toward me before lowering his voice. "We should talk privately." For a moment, I thought the captain would leave. Instead, he shook his head. "Whatever you need to say, say it." The officer hesitated, then handed him a folded piece of paper. The captain opened it. As he read, the color slowly drained from his face. I had never seen such an immediate reaction. Whatever was written there clearly mattered. The officer eventually left, closing the door behind him. The captain remained standing motionless, still staring at the note. "What's going on?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me more than words could. Finally, he handed me the paper. I looked down, my pulse immediately accelerated. The message contained only one sentence. "Tell her the truth before I do." No name, no signature, fling else. I looked back up. "What is this?" The captain slowly sat down again. "The 3rd note this week." My stomach dropped. "The 3rd?" He nodded. Someone aboard this ship has been sending messages." "About me?" The captain hesitated, then shook his head. "About us." The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, more dangerous. I stared at him. "Us?" His eyes met mine. The silence stretched between us. Neither of us needed to explain what that word meant. The connection between us had become impossible to ignore. The problem was that apparently someone else had noticed too. "Who would do this?" I asked. The captain leaned back. "I don't know. I believed many things about him. That answer wasn't one of them. He knew more than he was saying. I could see it. The problem was that I wasn't sure whether he was protecting himself or protecting me. The captain must have noticed my skepticism. "Ava. Stop." He fell silent. I stood and walked toward the windows overlooking the ocean. The dark water stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. For several moments, I simply stared. Thinking. Trying to make sense of everything. The mysterious woman, the notes, the security officers, the strange behavior. None of it felt random anymore. All of it connected somehow. I just couldn't see how. Finally, I turned back toward him. "What aren't you telling me?" The question lingered in the air. The captain closed his eyes briefly, almost as if he'd been hoping I wouldn't ask. Then he stood, slowly crossed the room, and stopped beside me, closer than before, close enough that I could hear the tension in his breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The woman isn't dangerous." I frowned. "Then why are you hiding things?" "Because this situation is complicated." "That's not an answer." "I know." The frustration in his voice sounded genuine. For several seconds he stared out at the ocean. Then something shifted, a decision. Whatever internal battle he'd been fighting seemed to end. The captain turned toward me. His expression suddenly looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally, like someone who had been carrying the same burden for years. "Ava." The way he said my name made my stomach tighten because I knew whatever came next would change everything. "The woman you've been seeing isn't a stranger." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" The captain swallowed, then looked directly into my eyes. "It means she knows me better than almost anyone." My pulse immediately quickened. The room felt silent. The ocean beyond the windows disappeared. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. The captain opened his mouth to continue. But before he could say another word, the lounge door suddenly burst open. Both of us spun around. The mysterious woman stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, clearly upset. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then her eyes locked onto mine. And she said the one sentence I never expected to hear. "Before you believe anything he says, you deserve to know what happened to his wife." Every muscle in my body went rigid. The captain closed his eyes, almost as though he'd been dreading this exact moment. and suddenly I realized the biggest secret aboard the Ocean Majesty wasn't hidden somewhere on the ship. It was standing directly in front of me. The woman mentioned the captain's wife. The entire room seemed to freeze. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The captain stood motionless beside me, while the mysterious woman remained in the doorway, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. The tension between them was impossible to ignore. It wasn't the tension of enemies. It was something deeper, older, more personal. Slowly, I looked from her to the captain, then back again. "What happened to his wife?" I asked. The woman opened her mouth immediately. The captain spoke first. "Enough, Victoria." So that was her name, Victoria. The woman shook her head. "No." Her eyes remained fixed on me. "You deserve the truth." My stomach tightened. The captain closed his eyes briefly. Not with anger, with resignation. Almost as though he knew there was no avoiding this conversation anymore. Victoria stepped farther into the lounge. For the first time, I noticed sadness beneath her frustration. Not hatred, not jealousy. Sadness, the kind that comes from watching someone suffer for far too long. "You think he's hiding a relationship, she said quietly. "You think he's lying to you?" I didn't answer, because if I was honest, part of me had wondered exactly that. Victoria looked toward the captain, then back at me. "The truth is much worse." My pulse immediately accelerated. The captain finally spoke. "Victoria." His voice carried a warning. She ignored it. "His wife died." The room fell silent. For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misheard her. The captain didn't react, didn't argue, didn't deny it. He simply stared at the floor, and that silence told me everything. I slowly turned toward him. "It's true?" The captain nodded once, just once. The movement felt heavier than any words could have. Suddenly, every strange moment from the past week began rearranging itself inside my mind. The loneliness in his eyes, the sadness hidden behind his smile, the way he sometimes seemed lost while staring out at the ocean. The pieces finally fit together. The captain walked toward the windows overlooking the dark sea. For several moments he remained silent, then he finally spoke. "We were married for 12 years. His voice sounded distant, like someone recalling a life that belonged to another person. "She loved the ocean." A faint smile appeared, painful, beautiful, broken. "She used to joke that she spent more time aboard ships than she did on land." Victoria quietly sat down nearby. Neither of us interrupted. The captain continued. 3 years ago she became sick." The smile disappeared. At first we thought it was nothing serious. His eyes drifted toward the moonlit horizon. But we were wrong. The silence that followed felt heartbreaking. Not because of what he said, because of what he didn't. The captain didn't need details. The pain was already visible. "I took leave from work." He swallowed. "Spent every day with her." For several moments he couldn't continue. The room remained completely silent. Eventually he spoke again. "When she died," his voice cracked slightly, the first crack in the calm, confident captain I'd come to know. "When she died, I buried myself in work." Victoria lowered her eyes. Clearly she'd heard this story before, many times. The captain continued. "Work was easier." His laugh carried no humor. "Easier than grieving." Suddenly everything made sense. The hidden sadness, the emotional distance, the walls he kept around himself. He wasn't hiding a secret relationship. He was hiding grief. Years of it. The captain finally turned toward me. His eyes met mine. "I should have told you." I nodded. Yes. He accepted that answer, because he knew it was true. I didn't know how. The honesty in his voice made it impossible to look away. "I wasn't trying to deceive you." For the first time all evening, I believed every word. Not because I wanted to, because I could see the truth. The captain wasn't a liar. He was a man who had spent years trying to survive a loss he never fully recovered from. Victoria stood, slowly crossed the room, then looked directly at me. "Do you know why I kept showing up?" I shook my head. She smiled sadly. "Because I haven't seen him smile like this in years." The room became silent again. Victoria looked toward her brother. "He stopped living after she died." The captain sighed. "Victoria." "No." She shook her head. "You need to hear this." Her eyes returned to me. For 3 years, all he did was work. The captain looked away. Every cruise, every voyage, every holiday. Victoria's voice softened. He pushed everyone away. I suddenly understood why she'd been watching us. Why she'd appeared repeatedly. Why she seemed so protective. She wasn't trying to sabotage us. She was trying to protect him. And maybe protect me too. The realization changed everything. Eventually Victoria smiled. A genuine smile this time. Then she looked toward the captain. You can be angry later. The captain laughed softly. For the first time all evening, the tension finally broke. Within minutes, Victoria excused herself and left. This time she closed the door gently behind her. The lounge became quiet again. Just me. And the captain. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the windows while moonlight reflected across the water. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then the captain finally broke the silence. I understand if this changes. Thing. I looked at him. What things? Use? He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. The meaning was obvious. I slowly walked toward the windows beside him. For a moment we simply stood together watching the ocean. Then I smiled. It changes some things. His expression fell slightly, until I continued. But not in the way you think. For the first time all evening, hope appeared in his eyes. Real hope, not the cautious kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that requires vulnerability. The captain stared at me for several seconds, then laughed softly. I have absolutely no idea what happens after this cruise. Neither do I. The answer made both of us smile, and strangely enough, that felt okay, because life wasn't offering guarantees. It never had. What it was offering was possibility. A chance. A beginning. The captain leaned against the window beside me. The ocean rolled endlessly beneath the stars. And for the first time since boarding the Ocean Majesty, I realized something important. I hadn't come on this cruise to escape my past. I'd come here to find myself again. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the disappointment. They weren't gone. But they no longer controlled me. And somehow, standing beside a man who was learning to heal from his own past, I felt stronger than I had in years. The captain turned toward me. A small smile appeared. One question. I laughed. What's that? If you accidentally discover another restricted area of the ship. I immediately smiled. Yes? His grin widened. Will you tell me first this time? I laughed so hard I nearly missed his next words. Because I'd like to be there when you do. The ocean shimmered beyond the glass. The ship sailed steadily through the darkness. And for the first time in a very long while, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt exciting. Because sometimes the most unexpected journeys don't take us across oceans. Sometimes they lead us directly toward the life we thought we'd lost, and sometimes they begin the moment we choose to stay.